Yeah, thanks. So I started my professional career as a software engineer in 2004, and those were beautiful times of the office work. And I remember the office design. Usually, it was all organized around the cubicles. And you probably remember this iconic movie, Office Space. And if you watch this movie, it's really fun to see, right? Kind of like interpretation of the 90s, right? So probably in a bit exaggerated way, but I'm pretty sure that all of you who watched this movie, you recognized yourself as the main hero of the movie, and all that nonsense and the brutality and the toxicality of the communications between the people, right? And that you when you watch this movie, you see so many really nice characters, right? So people actually whose main focus, right, is to survive in the enterprise office as such, right? and and then why people so hated, right, to work in the office back in the 90s, right? So they hated their managers, and yep, so socialization was there, but it was quite toxic, right? It wasn't healthy because people, they used to blame all the world around, the people, the managers, kind of like putting some lots of pressure and urging them to do some nonsense job all the time, all the way, right? And if you remember the main characters, right, so they were just disappointed and completely burned, right, as professionals. And I really like how this movie ended, right? So if you remember, if you watched this movie, if you didn't, right? So my encouragement to you, just take your time this week and today, just watch this movie Office Space, right? Just like plenty of anecdotes and jokes, and it's just brilliant. All right, and the main character just quit the job as software engineer. Uh, uh, he he quit, right, just to change his work as the software engineer. Quite intellectual work, probably well paid. He went just downshifted to the construction worker, and just he felt lots of just great times while holding the shovel, right, and do some construction work. Uh, but this movie is not really far from reality. So I haven't seen such cases, right? So where a software engineer or developer or specialist or highly skilled individual who used to work in the office and do some creative work, right? So just downshifted to the construction site worker, right? I haven't seen that example, but what we've seen in the 90s, right? So lots of people, they really quit the office work. They quit the enterprise organizations just to start their own ideas, right? So they just moved themselves and all their stuff to their basements, right? As people like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, and they founded their own startups, and these were quite successful cases, right? So I'm pretty sure that there is just a bunch of startups which didn't just succeeded at all. We're not going to talk about those cases, right? So it's really easy because I've learned that people experience and the first steps of multiple founders like Mark Zuckerberg or even Elon Musk, right? So, and at some point of time, they started their own business just in the basement, right? And so they also had the partners, right, or the colleagues who joined their venture, and uh, actually they expanded the network of the basements, right? So these are early adopters of the virtual teams, highly successful ones, right? And I can imagine Jeff Bezos, right, starting his Amazon thing down in the basement, okay, and inviting people, some enthusiasts, just around his area, and they were sitting, each of them, they were sitting in its own basement, right, and with the 2000s communication technologies, yeah, because that broadband internet was just introduced, and IP video and audio conferences were available, and of course they could just visit and go to each other place, collaborate, work together, right? But sometimes they worked individually, but they all valued freedom, right? So they worked really hard. They worked 24 hours a day because they were quite obsessed by their ideas to win the world, right? But anyways, that the excessive amounts of the motivation that they had, it's just because they felt independent, right? So they didn't have uh, this quite famous character from the Office Space movie. If you remember, this is Billy Lumber. Billy Lumber, who is just a really boring guy and just walking around and asking people and just bothering them with the TPS report. It was so fun because when I watched this movie, right, so I really recognized myself and my previous bosses and managers, right, who just from time to time their main duty just to came in and to to tell me, right, so if I properly filled Jira, if I properly filled the reports, if I properly filled like hundreds of different systems, right? So I felt like the processes and tools were dominating, right, over the people in interaction. Of course, we did have some sort of like corporate events. We went out from the office just to establish some great relations with our peers and the people who we know, who we value as our co-workers, right? But when we come back to the office, so most of the time, I remember like my first job as a software developer in 2005. I joined like a big American enterprise company, and they decided to start a very small office in Kiev, but we still were all together in the office, and that was still lots of isolation, right? So I felt like, yeah, I'm traveling to the office every day and spending 1 hour back and forth, 1 hour back and forth, spending my time. But so like 80% of my time, I was sitting in my own cubicle in pretty much isolation, and my job was just to get the task from the system. And the task was assigned from the United States, right? I was sitting in the Kiev in the office, just trying to complete the task, right? So, and just then the question, right? So why we were sitting in the office at all, right? Back like 15 and 20 years ago, when the software development flourished in the Eastern Europe, right? And so the only just reasonable explanation is like that was the model for the time, right? And this Bill Lumber was present virtually in any company, right? So, so the manager whose duty is just to manage and control individuals from time to time, just to put the sense of pressure and sense of presence of the big brother behind your backs. And of course, that you need to understand the compliance and the rules and to be compliant. And of course, if some other managers, some other colleagues can escalate some of the compliance issues with the individual, that's the role of the manager. Basically, to give the feedback and to make sure that people all they all align, so they're all on the same page, right? And nobody really cared if that kills the motivation, people motivation to do work, right? But nobody really cared about that. And then alternatively, it's impossible, right? If people, where they quit their job, their really cool enterprise kind of specialist job for something different, it's going to be it would be really great if everybody could be like Jeff Bezos, right, or Elon Musk. But these people who put all their lives and all their times at the table, right, and they risked with their personal relations and with pretty much everything, right, just to get over, right, and to to break the walls, literally, right? But how about others, right? So yeah, we know that some other people who want to quit offices and their jobs and the companies that they worked in the 90s, for instance, right? So they just started to experiment with alternative ways of working, right, and organize the work in the office space. And I think that the key motto of the early adopters, right, and early enthusiasts of the agile ways of working back in the 90s, the key concept was that the manager role is kind of like a useless role, right? So we need to get together as the specialist, and we need somebody from the business just to give us a problem to solve, right? And we don't need any managers. We just can sit together. We can be self-organized. We can be self-managed and deliver whatever business actually wants to deliver. And it's also interestingly that back those days, from the agile perspective and agile enthusiasts, right, and early adopters, actually nobody challenged the construction, right, where we still work all together in the office, right? And I think that starting from the 2000s and on, right? So the trend was a kind of like a backward trend, right? So just to bring people all together, to be collocated as much as we can, and the man who you can see on the picture is Alistair Coburn, and he is the one of the biggest advocates for the office collocation. So he created the thousands of different really cool designs. So how basically to place people in the office space in a way that communications can actually build up the knowledge, right? And he did a couple of researches, and that researchers demonstrated that each and every product or project, it goes through the two multiple phases, right? From the project or product perspective, right? So the first phase, we work as a team, right? So we need to grow the knowledge in the first place, right? Yeah, of course, we still do some useful work. We in agile fashion, right? If we deliver software or products or whatever project, even non-IT project, in iterations, like every 2 weeks, the team of couple of professionals, like 6, 7, 8 professionals, they should demonstrate the ability to deliver some value to the end users, right? To their business, to their business owners. And back those times, like 15 or 20 years ago, people struggled to work all together because that they used to work in the cubicles and to be really managed by and controlled by one person, by their line, right, who was just behind your back and give you a task and control your work, right? This can be even project manager, this can be a team leader, I was team leader in 2006 and 7, and I clearly remember so how I really enjoyed that promotion, because before that I was like a developer, and I really hated my team leader because I thought that my team leader is a bastard who forces me to do the work and the task that I don't want to do, right? And so by any means, I try to grow up as a team leader myself. So it's not like somebody else is assigning tasks to me, but I'm as a team leader. I talk to the business, and I create designs. Then I break down to the smaller task, and then it's me, right, who is assigning all the tasks to all the developers, right? And of course, that it's quite easy to control and to do this job when everybody sits together in the office, right? But things started to slowly change in my mindset, because I started to see lots of deficiencies and lots of drawbacks from this approach, right? So I felt like I'm turning into the another Bill Lambert, right? The guy who I personally like as anti-hero in that movie, right? But I didn't want to be like them, right? So and of course that having this type of mindset, irrespectively what your role was, right? It creates a challenge, right? So people need to learn how to work all together and collaborate and to be equal and to run the sessions and the meetings where there is not just one voice of the manager and everybody is listening, right? So everybody should be contributing to the conversation, to act proactively, right, in the meetings, and that didn't happen. That's why the industry recognized the need for the role of Agile Coach. Basically, Agile Coach is the guy who already practiced Agile ways of working, and with the certain set of traits and skills and skill set, right? So Agile Coach can come in and can actually encourage the team and share and show and in a practical way how actually a team can be successful, right, while working together. And these groups of people, we can call these autonomous, self-sufficient teams. So they learned, right? So how basically they can learn from each other, they can deliver the projects and products without being managed by one person, but in a way to be self-accountable. Even, in Agile, there is one popular practice which we call a daily scrum. In a daily scrum, people comes in and everybody without any managers, right? So just people, they commit to do the task, right? And they commit before colleagues, right? And this commitment even stronger, because when you give a commitment to a manager, you can have like 100 excuses why you don't do this, right? But when you sit in the office together with your colleagues, and in the daily scrum you promised to complete the task, right? And you understand, right? So you can just you can trick your boss, but you cannot trick your team members, right? So this environment becomes super transparent, right? And actually that forces people to work even harder and to fulfill their commitments. And to make sure that the team dynamics is going into the and growing into the healthy way, right? So you need a Scrum Master or Agile Coach who can coach people, right? So how to be self-accountable and how to grow in self-organization. And how about managers then in Agile, right? And managers just didn't disappear at all, right? They just realized these new rules of the game, and they realized that for people to be motivated, people really hate to be micromanaged, right? And they just stepped down and disappeared somehow, right? And they gave them like people in interaction put as a first priority. Of course, they soften rules and compliance and make a process and tools less important. It's still important, but okay, the emphasis, right, was on the people and interaction, and they told, okay, so I don't care how do you track your tasks, right? So if you don't like the systems, if you hate the process and tools, right? So as soon as you have daily scrums, as soon as you have a big team board, and as soon as the work progress visualized somehow, that's quite cool, right? So I'm okay. And then the manager just refrained to control individuals, but they started to control groups of people and teams. And I remember clearly, I saw a couple of examples how the team managers, from time to time, they visit and attend the team room. They can see that, oh yeah, 5 or 6 out of 8 people are present. So he can ask the question, oh, where is Billy or where is Johnny? They just ask just always question. Oh, you guys, you remember? We have only 3 days before we complete the sprint, and we're waiting. I'm so curious, and I'm gonna visit. I'm gonna come to the sprint review to see what you're doing, right, and your progress. Basically, managers somehow disappeared, but their pressure is still present, right? If not more than it was before. Okay, and indeed, managers learned how to impose even and how to gain even more control over the people, even in agile setup where. On the surface, it looks like all brilliant, all perfect. We have self-organizing, autonomous units, and we have managers who doesn't interact directly with the people, but somehow still put lots of pressure and control. Even if you can't sense it, right? It's invisible, but you still feel it. And all of a sudden, right, the new reality happens. And we came back to the idea of the network of the basements, right? However, this time it's not about the Jeff Bezos and the couple of enthusiasts who decided to quit this boring office work, but the new reality, the conflicts, the wars, the pandemics, and so on and so forth, right? So literally, they forced people outside to work outside of the office, right? So we need to learn, we need to figure out, right? So how basically we can work virtually as a team, right? And without all the great stuff and great things that we had back in the office, right? And for some people that became really difficult because, even if I'm in agile setup and there is no manager who individually micromanage people and controls them, right? It's still right. In the office, I can be more focused, right? Because I can abstract from my home problems, from the external world, right? And I can just I'm putting myself into the office environment, and I feel lots of colleagues behind my back, right? And it's not easy. It's really difficult to game the system, right? It's to game and to waste your time and to procrastinate, right? So basically, you are forced to do something. And now in the new reality, right? So we all understand. So we have no control at all. No control. I'm the only one in the basement in my room, right? And I still have all the meetings with the team, but in the meantime, right? So it's only me, right? It's only me, and then somehow to motivate myself to work, I need something else. I need some other sources of inspiration, right? And I think that this new reality also affected the way we coach people. That affected the way we, as agile coaches, as a scrum master, we we trying to set up a team in a virtual way. Still remember these famous Alistair Coburn diagram chart, right? So the knowledge growing is still there, right? So if you have a bunch of people and you put them into the project, if this project is a new project, they still have to pass this knowledge growing phase, right? And to pass this knowledge growing phase, it's impossible if you are not talking to your colleagues, right? It's impossible to do this without communications, without talking to each other, and of course, right? So when in the office, the communication is naturally possible. In the basement, in the home environment, whether to talk or not, it's basically your decision, right? And then the coaching is a bit different, right? So I was when the pandemic has all started, right? I was a truly believer of the physical collocated work, right? Because only like 90% of all agile coaches around the globe, I talked to thousands, hundreds, and if not thousands of different experts in agile coaching and agile people and professionals, and we all agreed, right? So collocation and collocated teams is the best way how we can easily set up a new team, right? How we can easily bring all the people up to the speed so that they can do their work and they can be successful as a team, right? And for us as agile coaches, it was also easier to control this process, the process of the when you facilitate the meetings, when you facilitate the workshops, you can see the reaction from the people. You can actually follow their gestures, right? You can follow their reactions, and it's quite easy to scan, right, what people thinks and how to respond, right, to clear all their doubts. And people, they of course they have a lot of doubts in terms of like how we work together as a Scrum, as Agile team, how we interact with each other, so how we can be effectively self-organized. Lots of doubts, lots of questions, and then the Agile coach could help them, right, through basically doing some on-site and omnipresent coaching, which is not possible now, right? And to be successful in coaching of the remote teams, I thought, okay, so I need to change something in my approach. So whatever I knew, just before all that happens, right? So it doesn't work anymore. I cannot see people. I'm not omnipresent anymore. But then I had really great evidence that basically the virtual and remote teams, it's not a new concept, and lots of startups, they actually started in that way. And when I learned the subject, right, so I quickly discovered that the people on the virtual team, they still needs to be coached, but in a bit different skill set, right, and traits. So first of all, they have to develop the sense of curiosity. They have to develop even more effective responsible communication. They have to be even more resilient, and they have to be to some degree creative, willing to network even virtually, right? And do some effective project and product planning and strategizing. And I found myself, I'm coaching lots of big names and big companies like Vodafone, like British Airways and Airlines, while sitting here in Ukraine, in Kiev. I'm basically coaching remotely the teams who mainly based in UK, in London, in Spain, in Italy, just all around the Europe, right? And while following the typical online meeting, right, vibe. So when some people, they come to the online meeting with a bunch of the questions, and some other people from the business, for instance, they come with requests, with queries, right? They start to they start to they start to play this pretty much a traditional online meeting game, right? So you tell me what you want me to do, and I will ask a question, right, if I understand it correctly. And I also found myself in quite unusual setup, right? So I need to facilitate online meetings, which I never did before, right? Or if I did that, that were quite rare occasions, right? I definitely, for 10 years of my Agile coaching experience, I was used to like offline meetings mostly, right? Like 95% of my time, I facilitated offline meetings. And in the online meetings, I can see lots of barriers in communication, and at some points, people get confused, right? So when somebody from the business explain what needs to be done, in details, people easily can get distracted and confused with all of these details, and start a discussion around the things which are, I feel like, not really relevant, and makes all these meetings a hell of ineffective, right? Just revolving around all the details, and we need to discuss lots of items, right? But in 1 hour, we can discuss only one requirement out of 10, and we're losing lots of time, and our meetings are quite ineffective, right? And then I started to coach people and to try and to experiment, right? So why we need to discuss all of these details, which tends to stretch all the meetings, right? So instead, I tell the people, right, and on the online meetings, online course, right? So if you're a business owner, you start with the why. So what is the business problem you are trying to fix? Why we're doing this for the customer and all, right? Just describe your problem in as much detail as we can, and just leave it there, right? And let people just to figure it out, right? And you know what I found, when we communicate a different language, when we communicate the language of the problem statements, it's much more effective for people to empathize with the problems, and instead of just going into too many details, just to understand the problem statement in the first place, right? And then the solutioning part, right, can be taken offline. People can work it out offline. Everybody can get his own ideas, and somehow then in the virtual world, in the virtual charts, instead of just like unlike in the office, right? So when people, they just quickly talk to each other, and ideation and solutioning is happening quite quickly around the board, around multiple things, right? So yeah, of course, that in virtual teams, these type of things are going a bit slower, but nonetheless, the people can come out, right? So if they clearly understand the problem, if they show the curiosity, right? So how we can effectively solve the problems, right? So that helps people to go offline, and without any control, just to come up with a solution, right? If we have a reasonable timelines for that, right? So we can tell, okay, so let's catch up like in the next couple of hours, or the next day, or tomorrow, day after tomorrow, right? And let's see, right? So how we can solve this, right? What is the solution for the problem? And I came to conclusion working with the virtual teams for 2 years already. So to to work effectively, right, in the virtual teams, you should delegate even more responsibility for the people, for specialists, for the experts, to somehow self-organize virtually, being in offline, using chats, using some sporadical calls, right, and somehow to come up with the solution that they wanted to propose, right, and then the meetings, they turn into the problem statement, right? Give some time and then discuss the solution, right? And so this dynamic is quite different from what I've seen how people and agile teams work in the office space, right? So the next one is coach and effective communication, right? Because once again in the office space, we can catch up together in the meeting rooms. We have markers, we have words, and people talk to each other. And we almost have forgotten, right? So how to draw the PowerPoint presentation, right? So because in the office the communication is more effective, it's going faster. But I found that people on the team, when they have perfect ideas, right? So how to solve the problems, but when they trying to explain online on the other end, right? So the other parties, they are struggling to understand, right? Because when just the verbal communication is really difficult. And I found that all the communications, and especially if you have a great idea and want to sell this idea, right? So it's you have a higher chance to sell your ideas when you have a little presentation, right? So then I started to coach people in my teams, especially technical leaders and all the developers, right? You don't need to draw many slides, right? But when you are on a call with the manager, with stakeholders, with other people, and you want to explain something, okay, so you always talk their language, right? And their language is, what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? With clear facts on the impacts. Just be straight on the points, be really effective with the time management. Don't try to spread your thoughts around the trees, right? And don't try to boil the ocean, right? Because it's time waste, okay? If you have your thoughts collected, right, into the 3 slides, right? Just what's the problem statement, what's the impact, what is the cost of the solution, what is needed to get the job done, right? And your kind of recommendations. So what are the next steps, what we can do next? And it's very important, right? So we close the conversation and the communication because when you communicate your ideas to somebody else, right? So you need to give a time, and it's really difficult for other people, right? Just because they need some natural time to assess this idea, to think, to live with this, right? And to give you some feedback, right? Feedback and coaching, how to give the feedback in the virtual environment is another important thing, which I haven't touched here, but it's also part of effective communication skill set. And of course, coaching resilience. What I found actually, when people talk to each other right in the office, right? So because they can see each other, right? It's really difficult to be rude and ruthless to the other people, right? So if you hear the idea from the other end, right? So you can criticize this idea, but you can actually make your critic a little bit smoother, right? And so you can soften the critic to the way that people still feel a bit respected, and that's kind of really difficult to attain these type of things while talking to each other remotely, right? And I found that when I talk personally and trying to talk about feelings and about multiple different things, right? And I found that people quite disappointed while working in the basements, right? Because they really struggling to communicate their ideas, right? And very often their ideas underrated. Very often their ideas heavily criticized, but also in rare cases, not always, I can find the idea wasn't good enough, right? But somebody else just decided, oh, yep, just go ahead, just do it your way. And when you fail with your own idea, right? So there is no support, right? And people from the other side, they started to blame you. That was really bad idea, and you feel like, um, um, while being in isolation in the basement working remotely, right? It's a lot of stress, right? Because it's only you and a couple of walls around, right? And some of the critics and some failures that you have, which is coming right to your face from the screen. And it's really difficult for people to cope with these type of the things, right? Some people, they also reported and complained to me as Agile Coach that they have great ideas, and some other people, they criticize these ideas, but actually they stolen these ideas, somehow revamped, retrofitted, and implemented the somebody else's idea as this your own idea. It's a sort of plagiarism, right? Which is not cool and not good. But we cannot guarantee, right? These type of things can happen because people, when they feel kind of like natural defense, right? So if with the virtual space, right? And so they think that some of the things can go unnoticed and can and, that these kind of dysfunctions can be easily managed. I need to be aware of this, and I need to help people, right? How to overcome all the frustrations, right? Associated with the communication and miscommunication, all of this, right? That's all about resilience. Next thing is coaching virtual networking, right? For people, it's natural when you sit co-located in the office, then you can sit shoulder to shoulder with a colleague and do some pair work. From time to time, you can mop all together, right? When you do the code reviews or some sort of team activities, right? And but in the virtual space environment, these things might be a bit difficult, right? But it's not as difficult as I thought, right? And even is easier, right? I found that it's really beneficial when during the daily scrums, I'm as an Agile coach, I can encourage people to try solve some of the problems while working together as a pair, right? And I practicing pair work myself quite often on a daily basis, right? So I have a task, and I have like 1 hour of work with my colleague, and I don't perceive this as a useless meeting, right? It's not just a meeting. So you connect with your colleague, right? So you share your screen, and so you're trying to complete a task together, right? Just changing the roles. I found that it's quite useful to have virtual business forums where people can, during the day, they can connect to their colleagues to ask the questions, to the subject matter experts, to the people. So then the problem, right, is just to give all the means and all the gateways for the people to get the answers, right, to their questions. And the sooner you can reach with the right answer to the people, right, the better for the team and all, right? So the team will become more effective and efficient. And of course, problem-solving chats, right? So very often when the team members, they raise their blockers, issues, obstacles, right? So they expect manager to manage this, to get the answers, but very often I don't get all the answers, right? But what I can do, right? I can find relevant people, and because we use all Microsoft Teams, right, or Slack, or any other sorts of comprehensive, right, chat tools, and tooling is quite important over here, right? So what I found is useful, I just go straight ahead and I create a problem-solving chat. I bring in relevant people and I just repeat the issue, I repeat the challenge. I say, oh, yeah, Peter has a challenge, Peter has a problem, and we need to solve this. And I leave it up to you guys, okay? So, and then for me as Agile Coach, I can see, right? So if people coming back to the chat channels and if they're doing some progress, right, while solving the problem, it's quite interesting. And I found after a couple of months of the trying myself as the virtual Agile Coach, right? So my work became even more intensive, right? Even more interesting because I'm discovering new ways of coaching people, new ways of how to establish effective communications and so on and so forth. Coaching planning, right? So I found that lots of the tools, they are not visual enough, right? So that's why I'm discovering tools like Mural, like Miro, like Figma, and when it comes to the task, to the plans, to the roadmaps, right? So I just give an access to everybody. Everybody can create columns, rows, right? Add the stuff, add the task, add the epics, add the features, and everything, all types of requirements. They can plan, they can draw the timelines, they can estimate, puts a lot of data, puts a lot of metadata, right, as they want. And as Agile Coach, my role is to teach people and coach them, right? So how they can visualize their work effectively. That's pretty much it from me. And just remember, when you move people to work virtually, and even if people come back to the office, right? Virtual work require more responsibility, right? And development of the soft skills, of the communication skills, and after some point of time, right? So people get used to the virtual work, and then what I see as a trend. So the European offices, they come back to the hybrid model where the people work just 2-3 days from office, 2-3 days from home, right? But anyways, what I've seen in the last 2 years, so all the challenges that we have, right, and that forced people to work from the basements, that's actually a part of the human progress, right? And people already changed in their mindsets. They grew up in the sense of accountability, responsibility, right? And we, as the coaches and the managers, we need to be really smart in a way how we grow up effective autonomous teams, right? While giving people all that they need, right? And keep the and just responding to their needs, right? If they need office, okay. If they need to work from home, that's also okay. With great power comes great responsibility, both sides, managers and specialists, experts, everybody. That's pretty much it from me. We still have 10 minutes. If you have questions, I don't know how the organizers arrange for question and answers.
Yeah. Slava, thank you so much for your detailed speech. Yeah, we do have several questions, and would you be so kind to respond them? So the first one, could you please describe the main 3 coaching approaches you use on the regular basis?
Okay, so it's a really interesting question, and talking about coaching approaches, there are really lots of tools and approaches, right? So what I particularly found myself as a really important one, right, is that you coach yourself, right, in the first place, right? So how you can coach people to be effective, right, and to be autonomous and to be self-managing, right? If you don't practice it yourself, right? If you are relying on the managers to control your work, right? If you try to replicate whatever you try to set up, right? with yourself, right? So and the greater sense of accountability that should come from you in the first place, right? And if you find what actually works well for yourself, any approach, right? And you can discover this quickly. You can start actually replicating these approaches to your people, right? Because if you see something that is working on you, that's going to work with your peers, and I'm pretty sure, because otherwise, right? So you will be really theoretical agile coach. And of course, the approach that works well with me is it's tons of visualization, right? So I rarely have meetings where we're just talking, right? So I force people to open the murals, to open the boards, whiteboards, right, and try to be visual as they can, right? And the second coaching approach, as I already mentioned, right, it's a problem statement. So if you have a question, right, just don't go straight with the question, right? So give a context, okay? So just tell, I'm struggling with this, right? Or I'm disappointed, or I'm really frustrated with this task, or I'm really frustrated with understanding, right? What needs to be done, right? So I lost understanding of my purpose, right? And these kind of things, they are not coming out naturally from the people, right? So the people, they try to play the nice game, right? So in a sense, right? So I'm still in control, I'm professional, I understand what I do, I understand. But if I feel this as agile coach, right, it is happening, right? So I'm not trying to put any more pressure on people, right? But I'm trying to help and trying to chip in the conversation and trying to ask them some questions, right? So, oh, yeah, can you give me more context, or why it is so important for you, and why it is so important for your business, why it's so important for the end users, for the customers, right? So asking why is really a powerful coaching tool, right, and powerful coaching approach, which makes a bigger importance, right? So during these online meetings and when people talking to each other, and I see again and again, this is the pattern, right? So with just thousands of virtual teams that I tried and coached the last 2 years, right? In rare cases, people asking why. They go straight into the what and how part, and this creates a lot of the problems.